The old man's hand trembles as he signs the papers, his eyes fixed on the floor of the care home lobby. His son stands beside him, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something on the screen. The nurse wheels the father toward the elevator, and he looks back once, waiting for a wave, a word, anything. The son never looks up from his call. I grip the armrest of my chair and know what I have to do next. The morning light filtered through the high windows of the Harrington Gallery, casting long rectangles of gold across the polished concrete floor. Maya stood at the edge of the main exhibition hall, her portfolio case pressed against her chest like a shield, watching the installers position massive canvases along the far wall. Those were Elena's pieces, her mentor's daughter, scheduled for a solo show in 3 months. Maya's own show, promised to her 18 months ago, had been pushed back again. Just a scheduling conflict, Alan had said, squeezing her shoulder with the same paternal warmth he'd shown since she was a student in his advanced composition seminar. You understand how these things work. She'd nodded then, because nodding was easier than admitting she didn't understand at all. Alan Voss had discovered her during her junior year, pulled her aside after a group critique, and told her she had something special, something raw and necessary. He'd introduced her to collectors, written letters of recommendation, even helped her secure the studio space in the basement of the gallery, where she now spent 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, building a body of work that was supposed to announce her arrival. That was before Elena graduated, before Elena decided she wanted to paint too, before the funding started flowing in directions Maya couldn't trace but could feel, like a current shifting underwater. She walked past the installers, their conversations echoing off the high ceilings, and took the stairs down to her studio. The basement corridor was dimmer, cooler, the air thick with the smell of turpentine and aging drywall. Her door was unlocked, same as always, and she pushed it open to find a small white envelope on her work table. Inside, a handwritten note from Alan. "Stop by my office when you get a chance. We need to discuss the spring schedule." No warmth, no greeting, just the efficient language of someone checking a box. Maya slid the note into her pocket and looked at the canvases leaning against her walls, the ones she'd been preparing for a show that kept receding like a mirage. There were 12 of them now, a full series exploring the way light behaves in abandoned spaces, hospital waiting rooms, empty train stations, the corners of apartments after the furniture has been removed. Critics who'd seen her work called it haunting. Alan called it promising. Promising, she was learning, was a word that meant nothing until someone actually delivered. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. "Rent's due Friday. Can you pay early this month? Need to cover repairs." Maya typed back, "I'll try," and set the phone face down on the table. Her savings were down to $1,100. The part-time teaching position at the community college paid just enough to cover food and utilities, but the studio rent, the materials, the framing costs, they all added up faster than she could calculate. She'd stopped calculating months ago. It was easier to just work and hope. That evening, she climbed the stairs again, past the installers who were now packing up their ladders, and knocked on Alan's office door. His voice came through, warm and inviting. "Come in, Maya." He was sitting behind his wide mahogany desk, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, the kind of drink that suggested the workday was done, even though it was only 5:30. Behind him, the wall was covered in photographs. Alan with famous artists, Alan at gallery openings in Berlin and Tokyo, Alan accepting some award Maya couldn't identify. And there, in a silver frame on the corner of his desk, a photo of Elena in a cap and gown, arm in arm with her father. Both of them smiling like the future belonged to them alone. Sit down, Alan said, gesturing to the leather chair across from him. Maya sat, her portfolio case balanced on her knees. "I wanted to talk to you about the residency opportunity in Santa Fe. The application deadline is next month, and I think you'd be a strong candidate." Maya blinked. "Santa Fe? I thought we were focused on the spring show." Alan waved his hand, the gesture dismissive but disguised as expansive. "The show's still on the calendar, don't worry, but these residencies, they're career makers. 3 months, all expenses paid, studio space, connections with collectors. It's exactly what someone at your stage needs." Someone at your stage. The phrase landed like a diagnosis. I'd have to pause the work on the series, Maya said slowly. The pieces are at a critical point. If I step away now, I lose the momentum. Alan leaned forward, his expression shifting into something that looked like concern but felt like negotiation. Maya, momentum is important, I agree, but so is visibility. The Santa Fe residency gets your name in front of people who matter. And Elena did it 2 years ago, right before her breakthrough show. Look where she is now. Maya looked at the photograph on his desk, at Elena's confident smile. She's having a solo show here in 3 months. Exactly, Alan said, as if she had just solved a puzzle. And you will too, just maybe not in the spring. The summer calendar is filling up, but fall is wide open. We could target October, November, give you more time to develop the work. More time. Maya had heard that phrase so many times it had lost all meaning. More time meant less money. More time meant watching her savings evaporate. More time meant Elena's show would come and go, and the collectors who might have discovered Maya would discover someone else instead. Can I think about it? She asked because she didn't know what else to say. Alan smiled, the same smile he'd given her after that first critique, the one that made her feel seen. Of course, take all the time you need. Just don't take too long. These opportunities don't wait. Maya stood, her portfolio case heavy in her hands. At the door, she paused and looked back. Alan was already on his phone, his attention elsewhere, the photograph of Elena catching the last light of the afternoon. She closed the door quietly and walked down the empty corridor, the sound of her footsteps swallowed by the silence. 2 weeks passed, and Maya applied for the Santa Fe residency. She spent 3 days on the application, writing and rewriting her artist statement, selecting digital files of her best work, composing a proposal for what she would create during the 3-month program. Alan had offered to write a recommendation, and she'd accepted because refusing would have seemed ungrateful, even though something in her chest tightened every time she thought about it. The day she submitted the application, she walked upstairs to find Elena's show posters plastered across the gallery's front windows. Bold black text on white background. Elena Voss, new work, March 15th to April 30th. Opening reception, March 15th, 7 p.m. Maya stood on the sidewalk staring at the dates. March 15th was exactly 3 months away. Her own show, the one she'd been promised, had no dates at all. Inside, she found Alan in the main hall, directing the placement of a massive sculpture that hadn't been there the week before. He spotted her and waved her over. What do you think? It's on loan from the Peterson collection. We're doing a small installation to coincide with Elena's opening. Maya looked at the sculpture, a twisted metal form that resembled something between a tree and a wound. It's striking, isn't it? The Petersons are major collectors. They're flying in for the opening. I'm hoping they'll acquire one of Elena's pieces. Alan's enthusiasm was genuine, almost childlike, and Maya felt a pang of something she didn't want to name. I submitted the Santa Fe application. Excellent, excellent. I'll get my letter in this week. Remind me of the deadline. March 1st. Alan nodded, already distracted by the installers who were adjusting the sculpture's position. Plenty of time. We'll talk soon. Maya walked back downstairs, the weight of the conversation pressing on her shoulders. In her studio, she stood in front of the 12 canvases, searching for the thread that connected them, the things she'd been trying to say about abandonment and memory, and the spaces people leave behind. She thought about Elena's work, which she'd seen in progress during the few times Alan had invited her upstairs to view it. Elena painted large, vibrant abstractions, explosions of color that critics called joyful and collectors called investment grade. There was nothing wrong with them. They were competent, appealing, easy to hang on walls above sofas, but they didn't ask anything of the viewer. They didn't linger. Maya's work lingered. That was the problem. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay on the futon in her apartment, staring at the ceiling, running through the math in her head. Rent, $800, utilities, $150, food, $200 if she was careful, studio rent, $400, materials, variable but never less than $300 a month, part-time teaching, $1,200 a month after taxes. The numbers didn't work. They hadn't worked for months, but she'd been surviving on the hope that the show would change things, that sales would follow, that the next year would be different. Now the show was floating somewhere in the fall, which might as well have been never. In the morning, she went to the gallery early before anyone else arrived and let herself into Alan's office. She wasn't sure why. Maybe she wanted to see the calendar for herself to confirm that her name was actually written somewhere. The desk was neat, organized, the computer asleep. On the wall behind it, a large whiteboard showed the entire year's schedule, color-coded by exhibition, residency, and event. Maya scanned the months. January, group show. February, maintenance. March, Elena Voss. April, Elena Voss. May, small works invitational. June, summer group show. July, closed. August, staff retreat. September, emerging artist showcase. October, TBD. November, TBD. December, holiday market. Her name wasn't anywhere. She stood there breathing slowly, telling herself it was fine. The fall dates hadn't been finalized. Alan had said October or November. It would be fine. Then she noticed the folder on the corner of his desk, thick with papers, labeled SF residency applications. She shouldn't have opened it. She knew she shouldn't have. But her hand moved anyway, pulling the folder toward her, flipping through the applications until she found her own. Behind it, clipped to the back, was Alan's recommendation letter. She read it standing there, the morning light beginning to filter through the blinds. Maya Chen is a talented artist with a distinctive vision. However, given the current trajectory of her work in the limited capacity of the Santa Fe program to support artists at her stage of development, I must express some reservations about her readiness for this opportunity. While her technical skills are solid, her conceptual framework remains somewhat narrow, and I believe additional time in a less pressurized environment would ultimately serve her development better than the intensive residency structure. I recommend her application with the caveat that she would benefit from further mentorship before being placed in a competitive residency context. Maya read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't change. She set the folder back exactly as she'd found it and walked out of the office, down the stairs, into her studio, where she sat on the floor with her back against the wall and stared at her paintings until the light shifted and the day had passed. She didn't cry. She was too tired for that. Instead, she thought about the architecture of betrayal, how it didn't arrive as a single event, but as a series of small disappearances, doors closing softly, opportunities receding. Until one day you looked around and realized you were standing in an empty room with no memory of how you got there. Elena's show would open in 3 months. The Santa Fe residency would go to someone else. Her savings would run out, and Alan would keep sitting in his office, behind his mahogany desk with his daughter's photograph smiling at him from the corner. Maya pulled out her phone and called her landlord. "I need more time on the rent." The pause on the other end lasted long enough to tell her everything. March 15th arrived with the kind of spring weather that made the city feel reborn. Sunlight warming the sidewalks, trees beginning to bud along the gallery street. Maya stood across the road, leaning against a lamppost, watching the crowd gather outside the Harrington Gallery. They came in black clothes and expensive shoes, carrying champagne flutes and conversation that floated across the street in fragments. Elena's opening. The invitation had arrived in Maya's mailbox 3 weeks earlier, a thick cardstock embossed with gold lettering, as if the gallery had spared no expense in announcing its newest star. Maya had considered not going. She'd considered throwing the invitation in the trash and pretending the night didn't exist. But something pulled her here. Some need to witness the thing she'd been replaced by, to measure the distance between what was promised and what arrived. Through the wide windows, she could see the crowd packed into the main hall, their backs to the street as they faced Elena's paintings. The massive canvases glowed under the track lighting, their colors so vivid they seemed to pulse. Maya crossed the street before she could talk herself out of it. Inside, the noise hit her first, a wall of voices laughing, complimenting, networking. She moved through the crowd, anonymous in her plain black dress, until she stood in front of the first painting. It was large, maybe 6 feet by 8, a composition of swirling oranges and deep blues that suggested a landscape without depicting one. Competent, appealing, easy. Behind her, a woman's voice rose above the murmur. "Elena, darling, this is magnificent. The way you've captured movement, it's almost cinematic." Maya turned. Elena stood in a circle of admirers, radiant in a silk dress the color of pale gold. Her hair swept up to reveal pearl earrings that caught the light. She was laughing, accepting compliments with the practiced grace of someone who'd been raised in rooms like this. Beside her, Alan beamed, one hand on his daughter's shoulder, the other holding a glass of champagne. Maya watched them, the perfect picture of artistic dynasty, and felt something shift in her chest. Not anger, not anymore. Something colder. Clarify. She moved closer, weaving through the crowd until she was near enough to hear their conversation. A man in a tailored suit was speaking to Alan. The Peterson acquisition is going through. They want 2 pieces for their collection. Elena, congratulations. Elena's smile widened. Thank you, Richard. I'm so honored. Alan squeezed her shoulder. We're all honored. This is just the beginning. Just the beginning. Maya thought about her own beginnings, the ones Alan had nurtured and then abandoned, the ones that were now sitting in a basement studio with no shows, no acquisitions, no champagne toasts. She thought about the recommendation letter, the way it had sanded down her potential into something small and manageable, a problem to be solved with more time and less pressure. She thought about the math, the rent, the savings, the slow erosion of everything she'd built. The crowd shifted, and suddenly Elena's eyes found hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Elena excused herself from her admirers and walked toward Maya, her smile intact but her eyes careful, assessing. Maya, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to see the show. Elena nodded as if that made perfect sense. What do you think? Maya looked at the painting beside them, then back at Elena. It's very polished. The word landed somewhere between compliment and critique, and Elena's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. My father's been incredible. He really knows how to guide an artist's development. Yes, Maya said, he's very good at that. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled by the noise of the crowd. Elena broke it first. I heard you applied for the Santa Fe residency. I hope you get it. It was such a formative experience for me. Maya studied her face, searching for genuine warmth or calculated cruelty, but found only the smooth surface of someone who'd never had to wonder if they belonged. Thank you, she said. I hope so too. Elena's attention was already drifting back to her admirers, her social duties pulling her away. Enjoy the rest of the evening. And Maya, don't be a stranger. We should have coffee sometime. She was gone before Maya could respond, swallowed by the crowd that had come to celebrate her. Maya stayed another 20 minutes moving through the rooms, studying the paintings with the attention of someone learning a language. By the time she left, she'd memorized every piece, every composition, every color choice. She'd also noticed something else, the price list beside the reception desk. Elena's smallest painting was listed at $18,000. The largest, $45,000. Beside the list, a small red dot indicated the Petersons had acquired 2 works, $90,000, maybe more, for an evening's work. Maya walked home through the spring night, the streets quiet now, her footsteps the only sound. In her apartment, she sat on the floor and opened her laptop. The Santa Fe residency notifications would go out next week. She already knew what they would say. What she didn't know was what came after. She opened a new document and began to write. Not an application this time, not a proposal, something else, a record. She wrote down everything she could remember, the dates of promised shows, the conversations about funding, the recommendation letter, the photograph on Alan's desk, the way opportunities had flowed to Elena while drying up for everyone else. She wrote until her hands ached and the sky began to lighten. Then she saved the document, closed her laptop, and lay down on the futon, staring at the ceiling until sleep finally came. The rejection email arrived on a Tuesday. After careful review of your application and supporting materials, we regret to inform you that you have not been selected for the Santa Fe Artist Residency. The competition was exceptionally strong this year, and we had to make difficult decisions. We encourage you to apply again in the future. Maya read it once, then deleted it. She didn't need to read it again. She already knew what it said, had known since the moment she'd read Alan's letter. What she hadn't known was how hollow she would feel, how the absence of surprise would mix with the presence of something worse, a quiet confirmation that the world really did work the way she'd feared. That afternoon, she went to the gallery to clean out her studio. There was no point in staying. The part-time teaching job would end in Prem, and without the residency or the show, she couldn't afford another month of rent on the basement space. She'd find something else, somewhere cheaper, maybe share a studio with other artists who were also surviving on hope and part-time wages. As she packed her brushes and paints, a knock came at the door. Alan stood in the corridor, his expression arranged into something she couldn't read. "Maya, I heard about Santa Fe, I'm sorry." She continued packing. "I read your letter." A pause. "What letter?" "The recommendation, the one you wrote. I read it." Alan's face shifted, the practiced warmth giving way to something more guarded. "Maya, I don't know what you think you saw. I saw exactly what you wrote, about my narrow conceptual framework, about my need for more time before being placed in a competitive environment. You didn't recommend me. You recommended against me." He stepped into the studio, closing the door behind him. "You have to understand, those letters are confidential for a reason. I have to be honest about an artist's readiness, even when it's hard to hear." Maya stopped packing and turned to face him. "Elena got that residency 2 years ago. Was she ready then?" Alan's jaw tightened. "That's different." "Why? Because she's your daughter. Because you've been steering collectors to her since she graduated. Because you've taken every opportunity I should have had and given it to her instead." "You're being unfair." "Am I? Where's my show, Alan? You promised me a show 18 months ago. Elena has one now. Where's mine?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched, filled by the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of footsteps overhead. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost gentle. "Maya, the art world isn't fair. You know that. It's about connections, about relationships, about being in the right place at the right time. Elena has advantages. I won't pretend otherwise. But that doesn't mean there isn't space for you. You're talented. You'll find your way." "Not with your help." He flinched just slightly. "If that's how you feel, I can't change it. But I hope you'll reconsider. I've always believed in your work." Maya laughed, the sound hollow in the small room. "You believed in my work enough to keep it in the basement while your daughter's hangs upstairs. You believed in it enough to write a letter that guaranteed I wouldn't get the residency. You believed in it enough to promise me shows that never happened. That's not belief, Alan. That's storage." She turned back to her packing, fitting tubes of paint into a cardboard box with careful precision. Alan watched her for a long moment, then opened the door. "The studio is yours through the end of the month. After that, we'll need it for the summer resident." The door closed behind him, and Maya was alone with her paintings, her boxes, and the weight of everything she'd lost. It took her 3 days to move out. She stored the canvases in a friend's garage, packed her supplies into her apartment's tiny closet, and spent her last evening at the gallery walking through the empty corridors, saying goodbye to a place that had never really been hers. In the main hall, Elena's show was still up, the paintings glowing under their lights, the red dots multiplying on the price list. Maya stood in front of the largest canvas, the one the Petersons had bought, and studied it with the same attention she'd given it on opening night. It really was competent, appealing, easy. It would hang in someone's living room, above someone's sofa, and the people who saw it would say nice things about the artist, the colors, the way it tied the room together. No one would ask what it meant. No one would wonder about the spaces it left empty. That was the difference, Maya realized. Elena painted for rooms that were already full. Maya painted for the empty ones. She left the gallery without looking back and walked through the spring streets toward her apartment, where the future waited like a question she wasn't ready to answer. But answers, she was learning, didn't wait for readiness. They arrived anyway, in their own time, wearing whatever face they chose. 4 years passed. Maya didn't count them, not really, but she felt them in the way her hands had grown steadier, the way her back ached less after long hours at the easel, the way the names of collectors and galleries had faded from her mental map like roads she no longer traveled. She'd moved to a smaller city, one with lower rents and a quieter art scene, and rebuilt her life from the basement up. The first year had been survival, teaching part-time at the community college, painting at night, sleeping in a studio apartment that smelled of turpentine and instant noodles. The second year, she'd started showing at small venues, coffee shops, a library, a community center. Nothing glamorous but real, with actual people who looked at her work and sometimes bought it. The third year, a collector from the city discovered her at a group show and bought 3 pieces. The money had kept her afloat for 6 months. By the fourth year, she had a reputation, small but solid, as an artist who painted the things other people looked away from. The hospital series had evolved into something larger, a meditation on waiting and loss and the spaces where people held their breath. Critics who found her work called it unflinching. Maya called it true. Then the email arrived. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, buried in spam and newsletters, the subject line reading, Harrington Gallery Archive Project. She almost deleted it. Instead, she opened it and read, Dear Maya Chen, we are conducting a comprehensive inventory of the Harrington Gallery's exhibition history and would like to include your 2019 studio residency in our archival records. Could you please confirm the dates of your residency and provide any documentation you may have regarding your work during that period? This information will be included in our upcoming publication celebrating the gallery's 25th anniversary. Maya stared at the screen. Studio residency. She'd never had a studio residency. She'd had a basement space she paid for month by month until she couldn't afford it anymore. She'd had promises and delays and a recommendation letter that destroyed her chances. She'd never had a residency. She typed a reply. I think there's been a mistake. I wasn't a resident. I rented studio space in the basement from 2018 to 2020. The response came within an hour. Thank you for your reply. Our records indicate otherwise. According to our files, you were selected for a 6-month residency funded by the Voss Family Foundation. Please check your documentation and let us know if you have any questions. Maya read the email 3 times. Then she opened her laptop and began searching. The Voss Family Foundation, she discovered, had been established in 2017, funded by Alan Voss and his wife, with the stated mission of supporting emerging artists. Its board of directors included Alan, his wife, and Elena. Its tax filings showed annual grants totaling more than $200,000. Its list of recipients included Elena 3 times. And according to the Foundation's 2019 report, Maya Chen. She found the document online, a PDF published on the Foundation's website. Page 7 listed grant recipients by year. Under 2019, her name appeared alongside a description. Studio residency at Harrington Gallery, including material stipend and exhibition opportunity. There was even a photograph, one Maya didn't remember posing for, showing her standing in her basement studio, brushes in hand, looking toward the camera with an expression she couldn't read. She'd never seen it before. She'd never been told about the grant. She'd never received a stipend. She'd never had an exhibition. The money, whatever it was, had gone somewhere else. Maya closed her laptop and sat in the darkening room, the weight of the discovery pressing against her chest. 4 years, 4 years of struggling, of scraping by, of watching Elena rise while she sank. And all that time there had been money, foundation money, grant money, money that was supposed to support her work, money that had been redirected, hidden, erased. She thought about Alan's recommendation letter, the careful language that had closed the Santa Fe door. She thought about the promised shows that never materialized, the opportunities that flowed to Elena, the way her career had been managed into oblivion while his daughter's was managed into success. She thought about the photograph on his desk, Elena in her cap and gown, and wondered if he'd looked at it while deciding how to spend the grant that bore his family's name. In the morning, she called a lawyer. The conversation took an hour, during which Maya explained everything: the promises, the delays, the recommendation letter, the foundation records, the grant she'd never received. The lawyer, a woman named Harris, who specialized in arts litigation, listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, there was a long pause. Do you have documentation? Some emails, the Foundation's published reports, my own records of what I paid for the studio, the recommendation letter. I took a photo of it on my phone. Another pause. That's not admissible as evidence, but it tells us what we're dealing with. The Foundation records are public. The discrepancy between what they reported and what you received is fraud. The question is whether we can prove intent. Maya gripped the phone. He stole from me. He stole years of my life. I know, and we can pursue this, but I need to be honest with you. These cases are expensive, time-consuming, and the outcomes are uncertain. Alan Voss has resources, connections, a reputation. He'll fight. Maya looked out the window at the quiet street, the trees beginning to show their autumn colors, the ordinary world going about its ordinary business. I don't care. I want him to answer for it. Harris sighed, a sound that carried the weight of experience. Then we'll start by gathering everything. Every email, every record, every piece of paper, and we'll send a letter. Sometimes that's enough. It wasn't enough. The letter arrived at the Harrington Gallery on a Monday. By Wednesday, Alan's lawyer had responded, denying everything, characterizing Maya's claims as the bitter accusations of a failed artist unable to accept responsibility for her own lack of success. The grant, they argued, had been properly administered. Any discrepancy in the records was a clerical error, long since corrected. Maya was welcome to pursue legal action, but they would vigorously defend against these baseless allegations. Maya read the response and felt something she hadn't felt in years, the cold clarity of knowing exactly what she was up against. This wasn't about money anymore, or even about justice. This was about whether the truth had any weight at all in a world designed to protect people like Alan Voss. She sat at her kitchen table, the letter in front of her, and thought about Elena's opening night, the crowd of admirers, the red dots on the price list, the photograph of a daughter her father had built a foundation to support. She thought about her own paintings stored in a friend's garage, waiting for a show that never came. She thought about the grant money that had vanished, the residency that existed only on paper, the years of her life that had been spent surviving instead of creating. Then she opened her laptop and began to write. Not a legal document this time. Something else. A story. She wrote about a young artist who trusted her mentor, who believed his promises, who watched her opportunities flow to his daughter while she waited in a basement studio for a show that never materialized. She wrote about a foundation that reported grants that were never received, about records that didn't match reality, about the slow, systematic destruction of a career by the people who were supposed to nurture it. She wrote about the cost of believing that talent would be enough. When she finished, she published it on a blog she'd started years ago and forgotten about. Then she shared the link on social media, attached to a simple caption. This is what happened to me. Decide for yourself what it means. The post went viral on a Thursday. By Friday morning, it had been shared 17,000 times. By Saturday, art blogs were covering it, news outlets were calling, and Maya's inbox was overflowing with messages from strangers who'd read her story and recognized something of their own. Some were artists who'd been exploited by mentors. Some were students who'd watched their work being repurposed by professors. Some were just people who understood what it meant to be erased by the people who were supposed to see you. On Sunday, Alan's lawyer sent a cease and desist letter demanding that Maya remove the post and retract her statements, threatening legal action for defamation. Maya read it, set it aside, and kept writing. The response to the response went up that afternoon, including screenshots of the foundation's public records, the discrepancy in dates, the photograph of Maya in a studio she'd paid for while being listed as a grant recipient. She added a simple question at the end. If this is a clerical error, why did it take 4 years and a viral post to correct it? The silence from the Harrington Gallery was deafening. Then on Tuesday, Elena called. Maya was in her studio working on a new piece when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up, some instinct that the conversation she'd been waiting for was finally here. Maya, it's Elena. The voice was different from the one she remembered, thinner, less certain. Elena, I read your post, all of it. A pause. I didn't know about the grant, about any of it. Maya set down her brush. You didn't know your father was redirecting funds meant for other artists. I knew about the foundation. I knew he supported my work. I didn't know about the grant in your name. I didn't know about the letter. I didn't know. Her voice cracked on the last word. and Maya heard something she hadn't expected. Genuine pain. "Why are you calling me?" "Because I want you to know that I believe you. And because I want to tell you that I'm withdrawing from the gallery. I'm leaving. I can't be part of this anymore." Maya was silent for a long moment, processing the words. "You're leaving. Effective immediately. I've already told my father. He's not handling it well." A bitter laugh quickly suppressed. "I've spent my whole life accepting what he gave me, never asking where it came from. I can't do that anymore. Not after reading what you wrote." Maya looked at her painting, a half-finished study of light in an empty corridor, and thought about the architecture of complicity, the way silence could be its own kind of participation. What happens now? "I don't know. The gallery's board is meeting tomorrow. There are other artists coming forward, people with stories similar to yours. It's not just you. It's never just been you." Maya closed her eyes. All those years, all that isolation, and she'd never been alone. There had always been others, waiting in their own basement studios, watching their own opportunities vanish, believing it was their fault. "Thank you for telling me. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that someone heard you. Someone believes you." The call ended, and Maya sat in the silence of her studio, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, painting long shadows across the floor. She thought about Noah, about the story she'd read years ago that had somehow seeded itself in her memory, about a mother who'd lost everything and found a way to keep going. She thought about the difference between revenge and justice, between exposure and truth. Then she went back to work. The painting in front of her was the largest she'd attempted in years, a canvas nearly 8 feet wide, depicting a room she remembered from the Harrington Gallery's basement. But in this version, the room was flooded with light, the walls transparent, the figures within it visible to anyone who cared to look. She painted until her hand cramped, until the light failed, until the only illumination came from the street lamp outside her window. When she finally stopped, she stepped back and looked at what she'd made. It wasn't finished. It might never be finished. But it was true. The next morning, her phone rang again. This time it was Harris, the lawyer. "The gallery's board has voted to remove Alan Voss as director. They're launching an internal investigation into the foundation's finances, and they've asked me to pass along a message." "What message?" "They want to know if you'd consider a solo exhibition, spring of next year, in the main hall." Maya stood at her window watching the city wake up, the ordinary miracle of another day beginning. "Tell them I'll think about it." She hung up and looked at her painting, the one that wasn't finished, the one that might never be finished. Then she picked up her brush and kept working, because that was the only answer that